Well, it is a pleasure to welcome to the show the goalie for Team Netherlands, Thomas Haitsma. Thomas, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first international goalie that I've had on the podcast, and this is going to be episode 140 something. So long time in the making, but this is going to be tons of fun. Lots to talk about, but I would love to hear the story of how you got started with lacrosse, and in particular, the goalie position.
For sure. My story starts in 2009, actually. I moved together with my family. We moved to Brussels and moved to a new school. And I guess, with that whole thing, it was kind of looking around like, okay, what's next? Also in terms of sports. And my brother, actually, younger brother, he started playing lacrosse first. And I think after a couple of weeks, he came home and he was like, Thomas, you need to play lacrosse. And I was like, okay, sure. Sounds good. What's in it? And he was like, yeah, it's great. You get to hit people. And so I think for that, that's where it started. And so joined the lacrosse team, but started off as a midi, actually.
Yeah.
So played my first season as a midi, and when fall ball came around, I took the step to play goalie, and I haven't looked back since. So that was back in 2009, and it's been a long ride since.
Yeah. So gosh, we're 2022. Yeah, over 10 years, easily 13 years. Why did you make the switch to goalie?
Great question. I think so. I remember it vividly, actually. There was a lacrosse tournament we went to with our team in Brussels, in Berlin, actually, and playing against a bunch of other European teams. And kind of in between games, we were just messing around and, shooting a ball around, like tennis ball around, actually. And we wanted somebody to get in goal. And I picked up a stick, never picked up a goalie stick before, and got in goal. And turned out I was kind of good at it. I was saving some balls, and it seemed interesting. And I mean, not that I didn't like the midi position, but I think there was something exciting about the goalie position that I was like, I would really enjoy doing this. So I think after that summer, I went to my coach and I was like, hey, coach, I would like to play goalie. Yeah. And he said, okay.
That's great. Now the sport, in the Netherlands and Brussels, not that popular yet, right? I mean, there it's all about football, what us Americans would call soccer, right? When you started playing, I mean, did you play soccer growing up and play other sports?
Yeah, for sure. I think that's kind of the main sport that I played growing up. Played a little bit of volleyball, but mostly soccer. And then, once I moved to this new school, it was very competitive. Especially with football, and they, had tryouts and everything. And I wasn't feeling it. I think I had, 13 years playing football. And I was like, okay, maybe it's time for something new. And lacrosse, it was something totally new. And as you said, not a lot of people play it. So.
And when you would carry your sticks, or they'd see you out on the field practicing, would people, give you those eyes, what is that? Cause I play with my friends here in the park in Argentina. And I mean, people would just come up to us and be like, what is that? What, did you have that same experience?
100%. Anywhere we'd go, taking the bus to school, or, walking around on the field, even students at the same school would also be like, oh, what's that? And still to this day, right. Years later, I still carry my lacrosse stick around, and people come up to me and they're like, what are you doing? What sport is this? And so I think that also goes to show, it's not very popular outside of, the hotbeds of, I guess, the US, but it's definitely growing. I think people recognize it more and more, I think, due to, its presence in movies and series and things like that. So I think that's really awesome to see. But I think definitely a lot of people give you the looks of like, oh, what is that?
Yeah, most people, if they've seen it down here, they've seen it in a movie, and particularly American Pie. That was the movie that was a popular movie where the guys played lacrosse, and so they've kind of seen it a little bit, but have no idea, obviously, how to play.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, exactly.
How do one of the biggest challenges of starting an international program is the equipment. It's a challenge in the US. It's expensive, right? $100 helmet, $150 stick, $150 chest protector. how did you guys go about getting the gear?
I think most clubs, I think that I've played for, they work off of donations that, programs that they've, worked with in the past will donate just like, a bunch of helmets or, I think things like that, where they'll just keep a stock. So I remember one of the first helmets that I wore when, I moved to the Netherlands and started playing for the club team, like the university club team, was one of these really old Revell helmets with like the square, like it really old, when you compare it to like the more modern Cascades these days. So I think it's definitely a huge thing. And I think nowadays, it's becoming more accessible. I think especially within Europe, you've got a few more suppliers of gear that make it a bit more affordable. But I think at the end of the day, lacrosse is an expensive sport. And so I think we are kind of dependent on, donations, players who, have lived in the Netherlands, who then have connections in the US will be able to, bring some gear over. But I guess at this point, we're also, grateful to have links with World Lacrosse, where they've also got a lot of programs in place to, help subsidize clubs getting gear and things like that. So that's really awesome to see.
Yeah, that is awesome to see. That's cool. Kind of going back to your story. So, you're playing lacrosse in Brussels. How do they say I'm going to try out the goalie, jump in there. I'm pretty good. How do you go about learning the position?
I think that was definitely a tough one because, I mean, at that level, we didn't have a goalie coach or, anything of that nature. We did have a varsity goalie. So he had been playing for a couple of years because we had a JV team and a varsity team. And basically I learned most of the basics from him. It was, hey, Matt, teach me what there is to know. And so, breaking down just how to stand, how to hold the stick, very basic, things like that. And I would say that's where it started. And the rest I had to teach myself, what worked, what didn't work. And of course you learn some bad habits along the way, but I think, over the years I've been able to like grind out a lot of those. And
what have been some of those bad habits for you?
Oh, I think just, standing out of position, holding the stick wrong, flared out chicken wings, like little things like this that now, after years of playing, you realize, how restricted you were, or, how just like these tiny little adjustments of how you even hold the stick and where you hold your stick can make such a huge impact of your reaction to the ball and how quickly you can save the ball and also how quickly you can save the ball and then push transition, things like that. Have been pretty huge. And I think now, with experience, but also I think with newer coaches, and now I'm lucky enough to have an awesome goalie coach who's really been able to like putting in time, like working on, some of these habits and really like perfecting form and kind of how to be a better goalie. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome. You mentioned learning from Matt, the other, the sort of the starting goalie. Any other goalies come to mind? Like back then, did you watch pro lacrosse? Did you watch it today? Like any other goalies come to mind? Like, wow, I really like his style. I've learned a lot just from watching that guy play.
Oh, no, great question for sure. I think back then, it was also around like, when YouTube was starting. So I think in terms of watching pro lacrosse, not so much back then, but I do remember, vividly also looking up stuff on YouTube, and I think finding YouTube videos of Scotty Rogers, for example. And, like he had some tutorial videos. But I think also then just finding more and more clips of like Scotty Rogers, Galloway, Blaze Reardon, for example, back in his days at Albany, like I think those kind of left a big impact. And I think nowadays it's so much more accessible to be able to watch lacrosse, because also here in Europe, we all watch lacrosse in the US, be it NCAA college, but now also with like the PLL.
Right.
It's awesome to be able to just watch them play at that level. And I think also in terms of learning, there's so much to learn from actually being able to watch them in action.
Totally. Totally. Well, and talk with them. That's what we're doing on these podcasts too. Because once once you get in there and break it down with them, it's you get to see some of the behind the scenes action, and it's awesome. It's awesome stuff. So speaking of like styles, every goalie kind of plays a little bit of a different style. I've watched some tape of you. You're a big dude. I mean, the Dutch are a tall nation, right? So you're kind of a tall goalie. Like, how do you describe your style?
I think a good point. I think I've got height on my side, so I think that's something I use to play in my advantage. But I think in terms of kind of how I stand, it's mostly, you know, a pretty medium arc, I guess you could say, like not super high, but not super flat either. Kind of, I think that's ended up working out the best for me in terms of, you know, tracking shooters and moving across. And then in terms of my stance, I wouldn't say super wide either. I mean, I think, you know, nowadays I see some goalies that are, you know, super wide stance. No, I'd say a pretty standard stance in there. But I think using my height to my advantage, I think I've got a lot of athleticism there. But I think one of the main things for my style, and I think a lot of the players can attest to that, is I'm a very vocal goalie. I love that part of being a goalie, is just, you know, being the general on the field and you know, sending the defense around and being able to communicate with them. I think, you know, games where I'll just be hoarse after for a couple of days because, you know, I'm barking orders at the defense, and I think that's something I really love. Yeah.
Was that always a part of your personality, or was that something that as you started playing goalie and realized, hey, I've got to be a little bit more vocal in this role?
No, for sure. I think definitely something I learned more as I started playing goalie. I mean, I think me as a character and off the field, I'm quite a, you know, quiet, normal, reserved person, but there's something about being a goalie, and in that position, you put the helmet on and you see the field. And I feel that there's like that bit of responsibility as a goalie, because you do have that like unique vantage point to be able to help your defense. And I think there's also, it helps so much to be able to be vocal, and gives me confidence in a way as well, standing there and being able to be loud and know what the defense is doing too.
Yeah, I love that. What would you say is your favorite part about being a lacrosse goalie?
Yeah, I think what I was just saying as well,
The
like
communication.
being the communication and just being like that I guess it all stems from being that last line of defense in a way, because you are, you know, you can make a team or break a team. And I think there's a certain responsibility that comes with that, but I think it's also an awesome challenge, you know, and you are, the last line of defense, and you get to see the whole field, you get to watch it all unfold, and you get to be there and the last one who's able to make that awesome save and get your team back on offense. And I think that's, you know, such an awesome position. And I'm sure it's similar in other sports as well, but I think that the fast pace of lacrosse and, you know, how high scoring it can be, I think it's, even more important to have those skills and be able to, you know, get the ball out and be ready for the next play.
Next question I wanted to ask you is, like, in the US, you know, you got universities and kids play for the universities, and there's a whole, you know, the NCAA, there's a whole league associated with the universities, which I think is very US, right? Like in Europe, like the universities don't have sports teams, right? And so when you go to advance to like your next level, is it purely club, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so I think, no, definitely what you said. In Europe, most of the time, it's not linked to universities. It's more city-based club teams. So, you know, in a country like the Netherlands, you know, it's very much like the bigger cities will have a lacrosse team, but then you do play across the country, which I think is really awesome, because you get to travel around and you know, play in different cities and play against different clubs. But definitely there are some teams that are more fueled with students. I think in the Netherlands, and I would say across Europe, really, like a lot of people start playing lacrosse once they go to university. Like they've probably played, you know, football or hockey growing up, but then once they reach that university level, they want to try something new. So then they want to take the step and try a new sport, which is when they would, find lacrosse and start playing a new sport. So yeah, then you play at club level, and I think there's usually a couple different divisions. But yeah, then in Europe, most of the time, that next level up is then playing for your national team.
Yeah. So is it big enough? I think you mentioned maybe before we hit record, you're from Rotterdam. You're living in Rotterdam. Is it big enough where Rotterdam has a team and Amsterdam has a team, or not that big?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think Rotterdam has a team, Amsterdam has a team, The Hague, kind of all the big cities in the Netherlands would have a team. And that makes it super awesome because you can travel around and visit all these different places.
Yeah, I bet. I would love to do that.
Yeah.
In the Netherlands. So you're on the national team now. Tell me, how that came to be. When was the first time you kind of heard about this national team? When was the first time you realized, what was it, something years ago you're like kind of put your eyes on you and made it a goal, or how did that come to be?
Yeah, I think this was definitely something that I stumbled upon years ago. The European Lacrosse Championships were actually held in Amsterdam in 2012, which is kind of the first time that I was able to watch the national teams, not only the Dutch team, but, kind of all the big teams in Europe. And me and my brother, we both went and watched, the European Championships in Amsterdam. And yeah, seeing the Dutch team, especially like coming out there and dressed out in orange and, hearing the national anthem, there was something that like lit inside of me where I was like, this is awesome. I want to do this. And yeah, so then it was kind of a work from then on to make it happen. And I think I moved to the Netherlands in 2014, and by 2015 I made the step to kind of go to an open training from the Dutch national team, because I guess how it works here is then every 2 years there's usually a tournament, either the European Championships or the World Championships, and then in between they usually have kind of an open period where they'll have open trainings. So you're still training at, national team level, but it's open to kind of anybody that's interested in this. And I decided to go and, saw it as an opportunity to learn from, the current, Dutch goalies at the time and the coaching staff and things like that. And yeah, it was awesome. Some of the best, lacrosse practices I've ever had, and being able to train at such a high level was really cool. And yeah, from then on, it kept going. And yeah, at some point then they'll have tryouts, and that's what I did. And I think that was back in 2017. Did tryouts and made the team.
Nice. And so were you on the team in Isreal in 2018 and the World Championships? Tell me about that. So that must have been pretty cool.
That was a really awesome experience. That was, for me, my first international big tournament on well, at this point, the world stage. And traveling to Israel was unbelievable experience. It was, I think we were there in total for 10 days, but you work towards this for 2 years, I guess, in my case. What the goal is, and at the end of the day, you got to trust the training that's been put in. And, we played some really awesome games, playing against Team Japan, playing against Team New Zealand, like the unforgettable experiences. And not to mention, you're there with a group of amazing guys who are, as dedicated to lacrosse as you are. And yeah, you're there for one reason, and one reason only, is to play at the World Championships. And that was unforgettable experience.
Yeah. How'd you guys do?
We ended up getting 22nd out of 46 countries. So I think we wanted to obviously, end higher than we did. But I think, the way that these championships works is, you're dependent on kind of what pool you end up in. So we had a really tough pool with Team Norway. and Team Japan. So Japan's usually, you know, in the top tier of the world. So that was a tough game. Really awesome, by the way. But yeah, we just didn't do as well in that initial phase. And so we ended up in that kind of lower bracket. But I think we can still be happy to be in the top 50% of the world. And I think, you know, there are clear goals that we have moving forward, at least, you know, next year, 2023 in San Diego to place higher. And I think we're well on course for that.
I love it. Well, I hope to see you there. I'm gonna try and make it. I'm from California, so
that would be awesome.
Yeah, if we can meet up, that would be amazing. Yeah, and good luck. Good luck to you. When you think about like the best lacrosse goalies to come out of the Netherlands besides yourself, who comes to mind?
It's an excellent question. I mean, I think it's a tricky question because I think there's, you know, a distinction between, you know, Dutch, you know, raised goalies. I guess kind of like myself, you know, I've never lived in the US, you know, I've kind of been part of the European scene versus, you know, goalies or players for the Dutch national team who have grown up in the US but have heritage, so they're eligible to play. So I know back in 2012, you know, Grant Zimmerman, he was the goalie for the Dutch national team. And that's an awesome goalie, and he played phenomenally. Like, and that's, I mean, I think looking back, he made, you know, during the COVID period, the Dutch team had this whole all-decade team for, you know, the Dutch national team. And Grant Zimmerman was on it. And I think not without reason, you know, I think he's an amazing goalie. To you know, have been able to dress up in the orange for the Dutch national team. And I think that's cool. I think he's definitely one that would come to mind for sure.
That's cool. How do I'm just curious, how do Dutch nationals feel about those type of players? Because you've got, you know, guys, like you said, the world rules, I forget how many it is, but you can have a certain number of players that have heritage. So like you said, they've grown up in the US, but their grandpa was from the Netherlands, right? So they qualify. I'm curious how the blend comes into play in terms of the team chemistry.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I know that this is, you know, it's something that also gets talked about. And I think now as a program, you know, moving forward, you know, I think the goal is to make it as much as, you know, a Dutch grown team as possible. But I think, you know, at the end of the day, when you look at kind of the depth in certain players, you know, guys who are from the US, you know, who have, you know, been playing lacrosse since they are 3 years old, for example, you know, there's a huge difference. And I think what those kinds of players bring is definitely a sense of leadership on the field. And I think, you know, that's why still, you know, we do bring those players along, because they have a certain level of lacrosse IQ and a leadership that they can bring to the rest of the players in terms of, you know, coaching on the field and being able to set up certain things. And I think, you know, at the end of the day, you know, it's the chemistry as far as I've experienced hasn't been perceived negatively or anything. But I do feel that there is a sentiment that moving forward, I think any program outside of the US would want to, you know, be as much homegrown as possible. I think it's also better to, you know, encourage your development in that sense. But, you know, I think all of these guys, yeah, they're amazing players. So we love having them.
Of course. But
But I think it's an interesting one because also now the Euros that are the European qualifiers that are coming up in April will be really interesting because they're in April now. It's also at the same time as the NCAA. So a lot of those players wouldn't be able to play for their national teams. So I think it does in a way make this kind of more level playing field across Europe, where, you know, you don't have teams that are as much stocked with these American-based players, but it's now more really representative of kind of what the homegrown base is looking like. That's really interesting.
It is interesting. Makes total sense. Are those, I imagine those are going to be streamed somewhere on the internet, huh? I'll have to try and watch those games in April.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Do you know where?
In April. They're going to be in Wrocław in Poland. Yeah. So, because of COVID, the European Championships conventionally have been postponed a couple times, and now they've opted for sort of qualifier format where basically a bunch of the teams that placed well enough during the Worlds, they're automatically qualified for the Worlds. And now the other teams are now fighting for those last spots to be able to qualify for the World Championships.
Love it.
Yeah.
What does your goalie training regiment look like these days? I think we'd mentioned maybe before we hit record, you just graduated, just finished the studies, moved on to kind of the working world. What do you how are you training?
Great question. I think my training right now is a big mix of kind of both on-field and off-field training. I would say I've got lacrosse practice 3 times a week. So twice with my club here in Rotterdam, and then once a week with the national team. Usually every Saturday we do kind of a big whole day kind of training day.
Oh, wow.
And then in between, I mix things up with both gym sessions. So we, from, I guess, the national team as well, we get some gym programs. So working on some strength things in the gym. But then I also really love, hitting the field and doing speed ladder stuff, jump rope, hitting the wall, kind of, things like that. So I'd say it's a big mix with kind of everything. So it is a huge time commitment, especially to make it work with work as well. But it's usually, finish work and head out the door to either the field or the gym to practicing.
Yeah. And are those training sessions like what I would think of a normal club university practice, or is it like just more like scrimmages?
No, I'd say we definitely do like full on practices with, the 2-hour-long sessions, where we'll build up with a bunch of different drills, shooting drills, defensive drills, offensive drills. And by the end, we'll do some sort of scrimmage to, simulate game situations to actually, to be able to work towards that.
Yeah. Love it. That's awesome. Has there ever been a time for you where you went through a slump, where there's some shots that you're like, hey, I should be saving those. I'm not saving those. I'm curious if that ever happened to you. And if so, how did you go about getting out of that?
Yeah, no, definitely went through a slump like that. I think it was off of an injury, actually. I took a gnarly shot to the calf muscle and ended up tearing a bit of my calf muscle, which was not fun at all. But I guess, once you get over like the physical recovery, I think mentally that was the biggest thing where, that mental block of, remembering the pain and remembering, that period afterwards where, you couldn't walk and you couldn't play lacrosse, that still, played a huge role in my game. And I remember, games after that where I just wasn't saving, especially low shots where, there was that mental, I guess, afraidness of the ball. I think that's something that, had to really, grind out. And I think that was, something that I was able to work with, coaches at the time and, focus on, okay, we're going to take away actual lacrosse balls and just go tennis balls for a while. And, just get used to that again. And, working your way up past those mental blockages. And now like, I definitely moved on from that. So I think that's good. But I think the mental part of being a lacrosse goalie and not only, getting scored against, but the ball hurts. And, being able to, work your way around that and be able to put yourself, your body in front of these shots that are coming is a huge part of being a lacrosse goalie as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point on the, overcoming the injury or just getting out of a slump. Is like sometimes you got to break it down and go way back to the basics and use tennis balls and work on that tech. I mean, stuff that you learn day 1, day 2, day 3, right? Go back to that stuff. And it sounds like that's what you did. I can't imagine the amount of pain that must have been, because the calf for me is one of the most painful areas to start with. And you got hit so hard, it tore a little bit of that muscle. That's unbelievable.
Yeah, it was not a fun time.
Yeah. Do you wear a little pad on there now, or you still go no pads on the legs?
No, I do actually. So I wear shin pads. Not
Yeah.
like big, bulky, I guess the like standard lacrosse shin pads, but I've got these like little soccer shin pads, I guess kind of similar to what Adam Gittleman actually came out with, kind of these
Yeah.
little pads. But I think for me, that's more just a mental thing, more of like I joke and call it my insurance policy, where I just know that there's, that little sliver of plastic in between me and the ball. And I feel like that also helps me get, past that blockage. And so yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I do wear.
I'm 100% on board with that, especially the soccer shin guards, right? Because it's not like if
Mhm.
you're covering the shin, that's not even a joint. Right. I mean, if you have like some soccer shin guards have like the ankle pads, that kind of like restrict movement in the ankle, which I think if you're a
Mhm.
kid, you should still do that, because getting hit in the ankle sucks just as much.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I mean, it's a lot of it is up here. It's like just kind of knowing that, all right, I'm protected. I can really attack the ball, as
Yeah.
opposed to sitting back and just having that flash of fear in your head that you mentioned. I think it really helps. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Really cool. Um, cool. With all your experience now, I mean, you've played 13 years or so. What advice would you go back and give the young goalie Thomas just starting out?
Um, I think I think a huge part of advice that I would give to, a younger me or just a younger goalie in general is kind of working on the basics and the fundamentals. And I think a huge part for me that I've really needed to work on is the footwork and things like that. And that's something that I love doing to this day. Jump rope and speed ladders and things like that is just being able to have those quick feet. And it's such a basic thing, but I think the benefits of it are huge, especially for the goalie position, where it's reaction and having to move quick. Has been a huge thing that I've definitely seen improve my game in the last few years. So I think if I could go back, yeah, for sure, I think, yeah, good stance and good fundamentals is also a huge part. But I think, yeah, working on those basics like footwork is a huge thing. And wall ball is a great thing as a goalie as well. Yeah, some people don't understand why me as a goalie has to do wall ball, but I think it's a very important part of being a goalie as well.
100% agree. 100% agree. I mean, if you think about it, we're playing a high speed game of catch. And so, the
Yeah.
more that you're capable of throwing and catching, like the better you're going to be as a lacrosse goalie. Those stick skills definitely translate. And then there's certain drills too, like the dock drill.
Mm-hmm.
Where you kind of throw it against the wall and then make your saves like at an
Yeah.
angle. And each time you get closer and closer, that
Yeah,
you can
exactly.
do right
Great
out there.
drill.
Yeah. It's funny. I had him on the show and I asked him what drills he did to get better. And he thought a second. He's like, I just did the dock drill and I did it a million times. I'm like,
Hey,
all
if it
right,
works, it
cool.
works,
Yeah. All right. That'll get you in the Hall of Fame. So there you go. Use that drill. That's awesome. Do you guys, I was just curious, do you guys, when you play, do you speak in Dutch, like, or do you communicate in English as a team on the field?
Great question. I mean, I think a lot of times it's a mix of the two. I think either way in the Netherlands, the level of English is already quite high. I think a lot of kids, are learning English from a very young age. And I think because of, the American influence of lacrosse and the terminology that we use, a lot of it is English anyway. And our coaching staff, especially at the Dutch national team level, they're also English as a native tongue. So most of that goes in Dutch. But when our defense gets together, after a goal or something, then we'll talk in Dutch and we'll talk through things like, oh, what happens. And I think that's also awesome of playing at the national team level, is when you get to play against these teams and hear all these different languages on the field.
Yeah.
Also kind of a unique way that the other team doesn't know what you're talking about, so you don't know what their next play is going to be, and I think that's quite unique. as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd say a mix of both.
Mix of both. Okay. I did a clinic here in Argentina and I speak Spanish, but there's no word for, dodge or cradle or, so you
Exactly.
just say those words in English. So it ends up being, like you said, this hybrid of speaking in Spanish, but then anytime there's like a, roll dodge, like technical term, like you just say the English version, and it's like that in Dutch too.
Yeah.
Yep. That's awesome. I saw you put out this reel. You guys got some new helmets, huh? I love that. I laughed I laughed so hard about that. That was awesome.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. That was a couple of weeks ago. We got our new helmets for the Dutch team, and I mean, we were super grateful and honored to get the latest Cascade XRS, and I mean that's I didn't
do everything in
it.
You do everything in it. Yeah, I'll link up to that reel when this podcast comes out. That was pretty funny. Well, this has been tons of fun. I'm going to wish you tons of luck in San Diego and the upcoming Euro tournament. I'll watch that. Maybe we'll get some save edits going on.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. Any other advice, or you think things that are kind of different playing at the international level that you want to leave the listeners with?
I think it's especially for all, I guess, other international players out there is it's growing. Lacrosse is growing so fast, and it's so awesome to see. So if you're in a position that you want to play lacrosse, do it. It's growing, and I think we're making a statement that lacrosse is here to stay. And I'm so excited to see kind of where lacrosse is going to be 10 years from now in Europe, because I think it's going to be completely different than what we're used to now. And I think it's an awesome future for lacrosse internationally as well, especially if we're looking at possible inclusion in the Olympics, and now with the World Games coming up, where you've got Team Germany and British lacrosse going and being able to compete at that stage. I think it's the future for lacrosse internationally is just so exciting that I want to do whatever I can do to be in shape come 2028. That who knows what'll happen by then.
I love it.
So,
I love it. Have you played the style of the sixes?
Yeah, we have. So we've experimented a little bit with that here in the Netherlands, because since kind of the announcements about the inclusion in the Olympic Games, that will be the new format. I think all international programs do in a way need to kind of be able to experiment with that new style. So yeah, we've definitely played a couple, just internal tournaments, and it's awesome. It's I mean, definitely different from, I guess, your conventional field lacrosse. Huge change in pace. It's so much faster, but it's awesome. Like it's really it's really fast paced, and it's exciting.
Yeah, and if you haven't seen it, if you're listening to this and you haven't seen it, it's got elements of box in that, like, it's a smaller field, 6-on-6, no face-offs or after goals. So once you get scored on, the goalie picks it out of the back of the net, and game's on. You just keep going. And it, I think the idea was to sort of level the playing field a little bit, because right now you've got US, Canada, Iroquois, probably as like the top three every single year, maybe some other teams, in there, but hands down, those are the best teams. And so to make it, more internationally appealing, you got to level the playing field. And by making smaller rosters and kind of this version of the game, I think that's the idea.
Yeah, for sure. And I think also kind of leveling the playing field also between men's lacrosse and women's lacrosse. I think that's kind of also been a big part of also the inclusion in the Olympics, is trying to make those, differences as little as possible.
Yeah.
And so I think, once you do, sixes, and I think, you look at, Team USA has, I think, also been experimenting a lot with the sixes, and also doing combined things with the men and women together, because, at that point, the game is the same.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is interesting. Yeah, I'd love to see more commonalities between the men's and women's lacrosse, because selfishly, like women's lacrosse, there's a lot of elements I don't get. And it's a really weird feeling as a, as a full-time lacrosse coach. I don't know. I got to sit down with some female experts in the game and just like, what is that call right there? Like sometimes I don't understand the calls. I feel the same way about rugby, like I understand the idea, the basic idea, but every once in a while there's like a call and I'm just like, what is that? I don't, you know what I mean? The other interesting thing about the sixes is the roster sizes are like, they're not big, right? I mean, I don't know how many, do you know how many official players you can have?
I think 12 in
12.
total. At least I think that's what it is for the World Games coming up this summer. Because I know a couple guys, that play for England lacrosse, for example. So, talking to them and seeing what that process is like. And I think, they go with 12 guys in total.
And you got 6 players on the field, 6 on 6 with the goalie. And so, so that's 7 players and it's like, who are your 5 subs? Like, do you carry another goalie? Probably not. Right.
Probably
like,
not.
Yeah. So it's like, you got to have somebody on the team that can, in a horrible scenario where your starting goalie goes down, that can like jump in there, which is just so fascinating to me.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think also, in that sense, having to think on that level as well, tactically as well, like, then you're also looking at players, much more in terms of their depth. And I think that's also what's awesome about sixes is you need to have a lot of two-way guys that are, able to run up, but then drop back into defense because it just goes so much faster. And
that's where your MIDI experience comes into play, Thomas.
Exactly.
So all goalies, get out there, hit the wall, work on everything. Well, cool, man. This has been tons of fun. I'm so glad we were able to do this. Let's talk a little bit, if you got some more time, a little bit about the mental game. I think we hit on it a little bit earlier in the conversation, but when you think about mental toughness when it comes to being a lacrosse goalie, like what comes to mind for you?
I think a couple things. I think being a lacrosse goalie, it's not only having to be that sharp focus of being able to track the ball and save the ball, but it's also being able to push your body to the limit and be able to dive in front of these hard rubber balls flying at you, and then also the part of when you do concede a goal that you're going to have to turn around and scoop that ball out of the net and hit that reset button. And I think that's kind of a big part of it, where I think it's so easy to get into this negative spiral of, oh, they scored and, you'll overanalyze everything you did. But I think a big part of it is also, okay, they scored. What's next? How are you going to clear your mind and be ready for the next play? Because, that's lacrosse. So, you toss the ball to the ref and have a talk with your defense, and then you go back to your crease and you got to have that toughness to be able to just back to zero and focus on the next play and be ready for anything, and trust your body more than anything to, be able to react to the ball, because, in most cases you are fast enough and you can make that save. It's being able to make that, mind body connection of, okay, let's do it.
Yeah. Love it. Such great advice. We just did the Tillman Johnson little mini camp, which you got to check out, by the way. It was awesome. Anyway, he broke down this one play of, where he makes a save and he throws like a horrible outlet pass. And it's like comically bad. And it's like, and he talked about how like that was a huge moment, right? Because it's like, I just made this horrible bonehead play. But now what? Like now, like, I could let that go to my head and I could not be as into it as I could be, or I could make 3 saves in a row, which he did, right? Totally change the momentum of the game and win a national championship. So it speaks to exactly what you just said of, once you give up a goal, it's like, well, what's next, right? Move on. Short-term memory. And it's so cliche. Everyone says it on the podcast, but they say it for a reason because it's true.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I mean, I think I also, have to say with that it's, easier said than done. I think it's also, once you're in that negative spiral of negative talk and like, oh, that frustration, it's really tough. And I still struggle with this to this day, but it's so important to, you know, actually be able to take that moment and, you know, ground yourself and be like, okay, what's next, step by step, and break it down into just these smaller bits, and just focus on the next save. So it is cliche, but it works.
Easier said than done. So true. That's the lacrosse goalie position in a nutshell, right? Easier said than done. It's so easy to break down these slow motion saves. Like, well, what you really want to do is drive your top hand to the ball, get your foot outside the shot, and then you got a 95-mile-an-hour shot coming at you, and it's like, it's a lot easier said than done. But hey, I love it. Well, cool. Thomas, thank you so much for, like I said, coming on the podcast. This has been tons of fun. If you had to leave the goalies out there with one last piece of advice, what would it be?
I would say, stay true to the fundamentals and just follow your dreams. Just do it. And, you know, I think at the end of the day, you put in the work and it pays off, on the field, off the field. If you've got goals, work towards it. And, you know, at the end of the day, the work you do, it pays off eventually.
I love it. How do you say, like in Dutch, how do you say something like, let's go? Or, you know, some sort of expression.
It's
like
another
that.
one of those like Englishisms that probably translates to roughly the same in Dutch. But you could say zet hem op.
Zet hem op. Zet hem op. There we go. We'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at the zet hem op. Thomas, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.